but we're going to get started with the formal program. So welcome to the Make It Big webinar series, which is both a webinar series and a design challenge for students with football star and innovative designer, builder, entrepreneur, James Develin. This webinar series is presented by Autodesk, and we're going to get started right now. So if you're just joining us, welcome. This is your first episode in the series, but this is actually our 5th episode. So I'll share with you some information tonight so you can get caught up if you hope to or you need to. So this is episode 5, and the name of this episode is the game plan, and that is the theme. Before we get started, I just want to let you know how you can participate in this webinar series. In the bottom of your screen, you should see 3 icons. You'll see a chat icon, a raise hand icon, and also the question and answer icon. From this point forward, so we're going to be asking you questions throughout the episode tonight. For the questions that we ask to you, if you could actually keep those answers in the question and answer, that would be easier for Jenny to see. You might also notice that the chat, when you try to chat, you can't see what you're chatting or what others are saying. It's because we are trying to protect your privacy as students. So we've kind of put that constraint on you there, but do continue to chat with us. And you are chatting with real humans. So one of those wonderful adult humans is Matthew Dalton, who's the adult human in this picture. He is the community manager for Autodesk Education. So throughout the webinar tonight, even if you have like quick questions or even just some insights to share with us on the Autodesk Education team, please chat with us and use the chat feature, which will also be attended to by Donald Bell, who manages marketing communications for Autodesk Education. So both Donald and Matthew are a rich wealth of resources, and they will be able to answer your questions, and they'll definitely be engaged and entertained by anything that you have to tell them during the webinar tonight. Also, last but not least, is Jenny Fennell. She is the Content Development Manager for Autodesk Education. Throughout the webinar again tonight, you'll be hearing from both Jenny and me in trying to bring your voices and to make this kind of not just a one-way conversation with students. I'm super excited tonight that we are also joined by members of all different parts of Autodesk. So for example, Jeffrey Hansen, who's the Senior Learning Content Developer for Revit User Experience, is going to be joining us tonight to talk to us a little bit about how you can add detail to a design using Revit. We also will be learning from Pete Gilmurray, who is a deployment specialist for Autodesk Construction Solutions. And also Joe Fields, who is also a deployment specialist for Autodesk Construction Solutions. So I'm super excited to get started. I know that Heather and James are also excited to get started too. So I should probably introduce myself if this is your first episode. My name is Kellyanne Mahoney, and I'm a youth program specialist at Autodesk. I am on the construction team technically, but I work very closely with our friends on the education team. I also would like to let Heather introduce herself. Heather, do you want to say hi?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Heather Leck, and I'm a product manager here at Autodesk. And I work on a product called Formit. And a little bit later in this webinar, I'll show you how you might be able to use Formit to bring your 3D context into your site and also do some site management. So I look forward to showing you that in a bit.
I look forward to learning more from you, Heather. Thank you so much. And also wanted to introduce James Develin. James, you want to say hi?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm James Devlin, a former New England Patriot. Been retired for about 1 year. So I am a current entrepreneur. My whole role in this is I was lucky enough to partner with Autodesk to try to promote STEM programs. I was an engineer by trade at Brown University 11 years ago. In my entrepreneurial endeavors, I'm hoping to, kind of bring you guys along my journey and really just kind of show the ins and outs of construction, engineering, architecture, and really all those sciences and how viable an option it is for our youth.
Thank you, James, and it's a wonderful journey to be on with you. And we're going to be hearing more from James later, and I'm super excited for him to share the winners of the last contest as well. Before we get started with that though, I just want you to know that we hope for you students to take away some learning from this webinar. So for tonight, we're particularly focused on learning how construction professionals are using new tools to drive a more sustainable, safe, and efficient industry. We're also going to be launching a new challenge for you as students to really put on your construction hat and to think about how you can apply a safety mindset, project management skills, and sustainability literacy to help James craft a plan for his gym. So he'll tell you a little bit more about that story as well. And if you have been competing in all of these competitions, so this is the third one this year that we're launching, we hope that you're able to build a digital portfolio that could also earn you a chance to win prizes. So have no fear though, if this is your first time joining into the contest, this is a great time to join in, and we're going to talk more about it as well. And you're already a third of the way there if you've joined the webinar, or even if you're watching this as a recording. So this is just kind of the process of how you can engage with us through this program by accepting the challenge, entering the contest, and making it big with us. So this webinar series is a journey from architecture into engineering and finally landing in construction, where we are now. So not only do we want to share with you skills in all of these fields, but also exposure to careers in these fields as well. And for you to understand how professionals who are in the architecture, engineering, and construction industry are increasingly also being asked to collaborate with each other more and more. So this is the game plan for tonight. So we're going to first hear from James with highlights and analysis from the last contest. And he's also going to talk to us a little bit about the new challenge and how it relates to his real life construction project. Next, we're going to talk about how you could describe a plan, a construction plan, with both Tinkercad and Revit. We're going to talk about how you could place a building with Formit, which is another element of the contest that we're going to talk about tonight, and how you can think about forecasting and communicating with Construction Cloud. And lastly, we're going to talk about the specific details about the Make It Big contest. So before we begin, I just wanted to let you know who Autodesk is. So Autodesk is a software company. We make software for people who make things. If you've ever driven in a high performance vehicle, or you've ever dreamed of owning a smart car before, if you've ever stood in awe at the beauty and architecture of a skyscraper, if you've ever looked at the infrastructure of a bridge, or wowed by the computer graphics in a blockbuster film or video game, chances are you've engaged with something that one of our customers have made. So one of the purposes of this webinar series is also to let you know that there is about 100 tools that are professional tools that Autodesk offers to members of the education community for free. So you will be actually sent these slides at the end of this presentation tonight through the Zoom webinar that you registered for, and you'll actually get a link so that you know where to find more information about how you can access our tools for free, because most of the ones that we're showing tonight are free to you and part of that collection. So we're going to start off, and I'm going to pass the mic over to James so he can talk about highlights and analysis. So James, take it away.
Sorry, I got to unmute myself. All right, so yes, welcome everybody. Again, I'm James Develin, a former New England Patriot. I've been very lucky to partner with Autodesk in my journey entrepreneurially, trying to follow my dream of building and designing a all-inclusive sports performance facility that also incorporates sports medicine, therapy, literally all facets of sports preparation in one house. And I've been blown away up to this point through the first challenge of just merely designing the gym. And now, the second challenge was more, the engineering mindset. We got to think about particular problems that we had to face. And, so these are the winners of the second challenge. So I do want to just give props to these guys. I mean, the grand winners, Theophile S, I believe that is, and then Gray CS06 and Zach Bob Dopp. great job, guys. I mean, I will go through, I'm going to try to share screen here and go through some of my favorites. So as I mentioned, the 3 grand winners, great job. The Theophile S, he was in the winners for the first challenge as well, and just a beautiful rendering, a beautiful idea. Really hunkered down on the actual engineering problems that we were trying to solve. So environmentally sustainable, inclusive to people with disabilities, or coming for like that really the rehab emphasis of the facility, and just did a great job. Incorporated living walls, which I loved from the second webinar. Also incorporated this kind of blew my mind, the roof garden, and then also being able to provide vegetables and fruits right to a cafe in-house. I thought that was an awesome idea. The solar panels we touched on, and then he also got this water recovery system, which was really innovative. I hadn't really thought of that before. My current residence I have has a water retention system that collects rainwater off the roof, and I never really even thought of it for something this size, but it would be a great idea. Just some awesome beautiful renderings like you see here. Same idea, garden up on top, the solar panels up on the roof. Really just a great job. I had saw a couple with, the inclusive bathrooms, gender neutral bathrooms, which I thought was great. And it was just a lot of ingenious ideas here. I got to give props to my guy, Josiah Miller. Always coming strong with great ideas, so thorough. Everything is so well laid out. I mean, even, toilet paper storage in the bathrooms. Hot tubs, and I think he incorporated a water system here down at the bottom as well. But yeah, I mean, just really some awesome stuff. So thank you guys for all your ideas. It was truly incredible to just click through there and see the genius ideas that you guys have. I mean, really thank you for taking the time to provide those entries, and just to provide a little bit of fresh ideas and new looks at a problem that that I will eventually face. So that brings me to my current state of affairs. So like I said, I'm following this entrepreneurial dream to try to open up my own business. And I kind of retired right into COVID. It was not the greatest timing, and really I kind of used COVID as a learning experience. I saw in the fitness field a lot of big box gyms with big footprints, had a hard time. They struggled through, being closed down because honestly their real estate was too expensive. And so learning from that and kind of using that engineer mindset, knowing that, well, this dream that I have, probably would take 20, 30, 40,000 square feet. Maybe I got to pivot a little bit as an entrepreneur. So thinking that way, I've now kind of reconsidered maybe breaking this whole idea that I had up into smaller footprint ideas. So right now I'm kind of going through the process of developing smaller studios that will take up around 2,000 square feet each, and kind of peppering them around the certain location that I have in mind, still being able to service and help people with their health, from all kind of aspects of it, whether it be therapy or actual training. So I'm really trying to just think of a better way to do it. I don't want to get myself into a huge thing and collect a bunch of debt, and then all of a sudden down the road, I'm kind of in a tough spot. So I'm trying to think of the best way to do it. And trying to dust off my engineering cap from 11 years ago at Brown, and just trying to think of the how to solve the problem. And the problem that I retired into was COVID, and things were shut down, and it was kind of a tough situation for everybody. So now this brings us to our next challenge, the third challenge here, and we're thinking more on a construction mindset. And that's really something that's particularly interesting for me, because in my endeavors right now, I'm really looking into actual real estate, going and visiting, seeing what would need to be done in these smaller studio types, storefronts of strip malls and stuff like that, because they have the square footage that I'm looking for. But I have to be kind of precise about how I plan it, depending on how much construction it would require, how long that would take, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really interested to see, your ideas here. I know Kellyanne will go into more detail, but some of the things that I'm looking for is honestly just an overall plan, whether it be, and we're still thinking on this big dream idea here for myself, the big facilities, because I think down the road, once I kind of get my feet wet in business, this still is something that I want to pursue. The dream is definitely not dead. It is, when I retired, that was my first idea, and, I got to pivot for the time being, but I will definitely come back to it. So I'm still very interested in what you guys have in mind, from, planning the construction organizationally, how the construction site's set up, the safety precautions, any kind of, code or compliance and all those kind of rules and regulations. We have to think of these things. So those are things that you can keep in mind. And honestly, a big thing is budget. I'm really learning that the hard way. My personal residence that I have construction going on right now, everything costs money, and every day lost is just more money out of your pocket. So I'm trying to be as efficient as possible, and I'd like you guys to try to do the same, and try to just think of ideas that can maybe, cut costs here and there, but also, keeping those things that we had in mind in the second challenge, the environmental sustainability, and, how they might be a little more expensive up front, but over time, the solar panel system and the wind system, and all these, water retention, how much that'll save over time. It's, all these things are great information for me going forward. So thanks from the bottom of my heart for all the entries that have come in the first two challenges. And I really thoroughly just appreciate all your attention to detail this far. It's been eye-opening seeing some of your guys' ideas, and I really look forward to this third challenge and some more, kind of more realistic, solutions to my problems. So thanks again.
Thank you, James. And we appreciate you, and we appreciate you inviting us into your story and the way that you've been so open and transparent about your process. I think particularly for our entrepreneurial students in the group, I think that they will particularly appreciate kind of learning from your own entrepreneurial mindset. So thank you so much, James.
Thank you.
All right, so again, I just also wanted to celebrate, and I know James did already, just everyone who entered the contest. I was so blown away by your imagination. And those of you who haven't entered yet, this contest actually requires you to go back into the earlier entries from contest 1 and contest 2, and really kind of start to analyze and appreciate these designs that students have made, and really start to think about, as James was saying, realistically, he wants to build this building ultimately. So what can you do in order to help him come up with a game plan to do that? So moving into, as we're about to move into specifics about the design challenge, but before we move on, because this is actually part of the contest, just thinking about the designs that James shared with you tonight, what do you like most about some of these winning designs? And which one to you seems the most constructible? So do please let us know. Do this in the question and answer if you can, because it's easier for Jenny to see right away. So just thinking about what you heard from James and what you saw in those winning designs, what did you like about them? What was interesting? Did you agree with what James had to say about the winning designs? And which of the ones that you've seen so far seems to be the one that's most constructible? And by most constructible, really like fit to build, something that you could imagine being built if James were ready to do that soon. Jenny, any responses in the question and answer?
Not yet.
You guys are on points tonight.
We do have a comment. I think the second one was most constructible because it was the smallest of them.
Mm-hmm. So you might think about which one, just by looking at, what you see in their designs, which one seems to be the smallest in scale, which we're going to actually talk a little bit about tonight.
Another comment is, I like the designs that incorporated green space into the ceilings. Again, I did not see many incorporate the actual outside space like fields.
Yeah, so even thinking about James's and, revisioning his idea immediately, and him thinking about having a smaller square footage of his space, you really want to think about that concept of modularity that we talked about in the first challenge, and how, the roof can also serve as something else, or like the steps can also serve as event space, but also, a place where you can train. So really thinking about how many purposes you can get from, one part of the design.
We have a comment about liking the water recovery system.
Very nice. And sustainability is also part of this contest too.
Mm-hmm.
So do please keep letting us know your thoughts in the question and answer. And also if you have quick questions or things you'd like to tell us that are off the topic of this question, please keep it going in the chat. We appreciate your engagement. It keeps us engaged too. So next we're going to talk about describing the plan with Tinkercad and Revit. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the contest. So through this contest, we hope that it inspires you to imagine the future of construction, so the construction site of the future, and really start to think about how we could integrate even new technologies or emerging technologies into the construction space. So in looking around at this graphic, you might even be a little bit surprised by some of the technologies that you see represented in the construction industry. But what you might be even more surprised to learn is this isn't really necessarily the future. A lot of construction companies are starting to use some of these technologies in projects today. So, and this really gets to thinking about the future of making things and how, in order to, build a better planet and really solve some of the problems that we are facing in the construction industry, it requires a different way of making things. And sometimes when we try to make a change, it's good to think about what can we learn from other industries. So for example, the manufacturing industry is an industry that the construction industry is learning quite a bit about. So for example, in the future, or even today, prefabricating parts of buildings, like in a factory setting, for example, before you bring it to the construction site, or integrating robotics into construction in order to make the construction site more safe and more efficient. So when we think about, for example, learning for the design for manufacturing in assembly industry, you might also think about like the automotive industry as well. And when we're designing for manufacturing and assembly, you want to make sure that, when you're in an architectural mindset, you're oftentimes being super creative and coming up with, unique building style that doesn't have a lot of repetition or doesn't have, a variety, it has more of a variety of patterns in it. But when you're starting to think about building, you might want to, simplify that a little bit. So for example, this is a hospital that was built in Northern Europe. So when we think of like hospitals or even like schools or hotels, for example, oftentimes in building them, you want to have a lot of repetition. So for example, in this illustration, you could see that we analyzed that building. Initially, there were 20 or 30 different types of rooms in the building, and we narrowed it down to 5 or 6 different patterns. And in simplifying the design of the building, then you're able to then kind of go down into the actual components of each room and think about, what are the individual components and how could we turn even a room almost into kind of like a kit of parts, like something that you might see in like if you were like assembling IKEA furniture, for example. And then when we think of like all the shipping and transportation in the construction industries, how can we keep a better control of like what types of parts that we're using and what is going into the supply chain? Another way that manufacturing is impacting the construction industry in exciting ways is thinking about additive manufacturing or 3D printing. So this is an example of a drainage pit. It's typically a component of a building that's expensive to make because of the formwork that it requires, and also because of the amount of materials you might need in order to make it. But if you employ robotics and 3D printing and additive manufacturing and making a component like a drainage pit, you can actually waste less materials as well, in addition to saving money. Another example is robotics. So at the Technology Center, Autodesk Technology Center in San Francisco, we had a question about, could a robot, if it were given visual recognition and a virtual environment, could it teach itself how to assemble and stack bricks in a virtual environment? So this is an example of what the robot was able to do overnight, what looks like a lot of fun. And then the next question was, if the robot taught itself how to assemble those bricks in a virtual environment, could the robot take what it learned and then apply it to bricks in real life? And you can see here it was able to do so. And this looks like a lot of fun, which I'm sure probably was a really fun project to do, but also think of those toy plastic bricks as a proxy for bricks in real life. So this is an example of a company in Australia that is combining robotics. And also we're gonna learn a little bit about building information models because this robot knows the building information model for this building. It's able to actually know where to place the bricks in real life. And lastly, just another example of robotics in the construction industry. This is a construction company called Skanska that is thinking about things in construction that are either dangerous or really repetitive or require a lot of precision. And one of these activities in construction that requires a lot of precision is drilling. So this is an example of a robot that can drill holes 8 times faster than a human and also at sub-millimeter precision. So we want you, so when we talk about the future of construction, we're not talking just about these fun stories and these emerging technologies. We're also talking about you, and we want you as the future of construction to be able to start to grow your construction management skills and really be able to see yourself as someone who could work in the construction industry. So this contest asks you to place the building that James hopes to build in a specific site, describe the 3 main building systems, so structural, exterior wall, and roofing, communicate construction phasing for building the design, and also forecasting the rough cost or the budget for the building. So again, you're going to be not designing something new, you're going to be going back into earlier designs and finding one that you think would be the best to build and the most fit to build. So one of our contestants that James already spoke about was Josiah Miller. And Josiah was kind enough to lend us a design that Josiah made in the first competition. So this is Josiah's design. Josiah made this in Tinkercad. And we're going to learn tonight from Jeff, who's on the Autodesk team, how Jeff took Josiah's design and started to put it into more of a building information model using Revit and starting to think about mechanical components of the design and how mechanical components can sometimes interfere with maybe some of your fun architecture ideas, or even thinking about structural considerations that you might want to make as well in your design. So you can even see another version of that here in thinking about, like, how are you going to hold up that cool design of the roof? And then what are you going to do about, the HVAC system, for example? So you may be starting in Tinkercad and you might be continuing in Tinkercad in this design, and that's fine. In the construction industry, we're even starting to see how if you're using Tinkercad, you have a digital model already. And in the construction industry, we're really moving forward and thinking about how we can start to do things like quantify materials and measure and do all of those things with the digital model before the building is even made. So here are some examples. There's some inspiration from how you could do this in Tinkercad. So you may already have your model in Tinkercad, and you might even be thinking about, like, just this model that I have in Tinkercad, how big is it, like if I were to 3D print it, for example. Within Tinkercad, we have collections such as the Making at Home collection, where you can pull in regular household items that actually will come in at scale. So you can see how big your Tinkercad model would be in real life. So this is my model of a playground in comparison to some toothpicks. You might even think about how, through this contest, building a physical prototype of your design, it doesn't need to be fancy, how you could learn more about your design through actually like making it and trying to build it, and maybe even building it with things that you have around the house. Within Tinkercad, there are also measurement tools. So for example, the ruler, which you see circled in the upper right-hand corner, you can drag out to your design and you can measure different parts of your design. And within the work plane, the user interface of Tinkercad itself, in the lower right-hand corner, there's a grid that you can edit. So it's preset to millimeters, but you could change it to inches. You could also change it to bricks. And what does that mean? That means that within Tinkercad, many people don't actually realize that you can take your design, and in the upper right-hand corner, there's a little icon that looks like a familiar plastic brick that you might have played with when you were younger. I still play with them now. So when you hit that button, it actually automatically transforms your design into bricks, and you can start to quantify like how many bricks it would take to build my design. And maybe even think about that, how that could be a proxy for materials. You could even start to think about scale. So for example, this is a typical plastic brick that you might find around your house. This is the actual proportions of it. So it's actually a little bit taller than it is wide. So it's 1 to 1.2 is the proportion of it. And you might try to imagine, well, if my design were transformed into bricks, how big would that be in real life? So you might think to yourself, well, like 1.2 could be like 2.4 feet. And in real life, 2 stacked on top of each other would be about 4 feet, 10 inches. And that would be maybe the size of a human, a small human, similar to me. So you might also think about in real life, if you were to inject yourself into your design, how big would you be in relationship to it? So are the doors actually the right size that they would need to be? You can also even start to think about, building codes and regulations around the sizes of things in your design. So this is how the bricks function works within Tinkercad. So you can change the level of refinement of the way that it transforms your design into bricks by using those icons at the top that you see. One of them's highlighted in blue. And you can also really start to quantify the bricks layer by layer, because you can build your design layer by layer from the ground up. Lastly, you can also, once you've measured the different components of your design, you can start applying a safety mindset. So when you look at the text of the contest, you'll actually see that we've linked to different building codes, also ADA, so regulations around designing things with and for people with disabilities. There's also some environmental regulations as well. And you can also even start to think about features within Tinkercad that you could use to inspect the job site, even if you haven't been there before. So for example, if you're designing on the iPad app in Tinkercad, there's actually an augmented reality feature. So you could take your design, outside in your yard, like I did here, and take a picture of it in real life. Or you might, I know that in the past, and James can share with us again, I think the region of Pennsylvania he's thinking about placing his design. You could go into Bing Maps or Google Maps and try to find some locations in that area that maybe have empty spaces and try to place your design that way. Heather is actually going to talk to you a little bit more about how you could use geographic information in order to create a construction logistics plan. So within Tinkercad, you could make a cross section. You could also add notes. There's a fun notes feature with Tinkercad as well. So really trying to get into detail, with which you'll learn a little bit more from Jeff in a minute. So again, this is the design that Jeff made, inspired by Josiah's design. And Jeff is going to take it away now to talk a little bit about how you can add detail to your model using Revit like he did here.
Yeah, thanks, Kellyanne. So when Kellyanne asked me to be part of this presentation, she asked me to look at the Tinkercad model and see what I could do to think about detail. And so I brought it into a tool called Revit, that architects use to develop models further. So a lot of times when architects work, they will work at a, they'll work with clay models or paper or a massing tool like Tinkercad, something that they can kind of really explore form and do different things. But when it's time to start actually making and building that building, which is part of what this challenge is about, is getting to that next level of detail, you have to use a tool that has a little bit more refinement to it so you can get into that higher level of detail. And so I put together this model. You can go ahead and play it, Kellyanne. So I started with this model and then developed it into this Revit model. And you can see that in Revit, we build in 3D like we do in other things. And I started to think about how the structure and how those ducts come through the trusses that make up that building. And then thinking a little bit more about the detail is, how does that roof and the truss, how do those meet? And how do those meet against the wall? And how do those things meet against the floor? So you can actually slice out pieces of the model and you can start to look at those things in much more detail. So let's go ahead and look at the next thing. So as an example here, I'm just looking at this point of just one small piece of that model, just where the roof and where the wall are meeting with one another, and thinking about all the pieces of material and all the things that go into building that. You have the bricks of the wall and the wooden truss, or maybe it's a steel truss, or does the truss set on an I-beam like I have here that's on a steel column, or is the wall made up of bricks all the way up to the top and the truss is sitting on a brick? Those are all decisions that an architect is making as part of that process of bringing an idea into reality. You have to think about all the parts that go into making a building, because when you have a building, you can't just ship the building to the site and drop it in place, right? All of the building comes in lots of smaller parts. Everybody, I'm sure, has probably been to a Home Depot or is at least familiar with the idea of building materials. Building materials are small, and how do those things come together? And so there's these systems of parts and how much space is needed for each thing. Is the soffit enclosed like I have it here with a plate, or is it open? Those are all decisions that the architect makes as they detail their model, and it really actually starts to inform the larger form in a lot of ways. You can move to the next one, Kellyanne, if you like.
Jeff, could you talk just really quickly about what the word soffit means for students who might not know what it means?
So a soffit is the area between where the roof is overhanging and the wall is coming up to meet the roof. In some cases, that may be an enclosed space, or in some cases, that may be an open space where you can see the ends of the roof trusses coming through the wall. So depending on what you want to do with your building, you may enclose a soffit or you may leave it open, depending on what your design intent is.
Fun choices. Thank you, Jeff.
So in this detail, I'm showing how that building meets the ground. So those are the two places that, there's really a lot of thinking that needs to go on. How does the building meet the sky at the roof? And how does the building meet the ground and get connected down into the ground? What is the foundation condition like? How far does it have to go into the earth? In a northern climate where I live, the foundation has to go 4 feet down into the earth. In a climate where I grew up in New Mexico, the foundation only has to go down about 18 inches into the earth. So those are things to think about as well. And then just something to help you as you think about the contest and think about these details. I'm trained as an architect, so I know what these details look like, but even trained architects do searches like I've listed here, wall roof connection, and you can find lots of images showing you all these little parts and pieces that make up a wall and roof connection. And I've used Revit here, but there's nothing saying that you can't use, like Kellyanne showed, you could use Tinkercad and just do a small part of the building in a much higher level of detail and let that explain what's going on in the rest of the building, right? We don't detail every single piece of the building. We use example parts that are the most important ones. And so I think by using it, you can, definitely go out and find this information and see what parts go into making a building. I think that'll help you be successful in the contest.
Thank you, Jeff. So many interesting details to think about and explore, and also lots of questions to think about too. So thank you, Jeff, for that. You provided us with a lot of inspiration. And for those of you who are really interested in construction management, I also just wanted to share this with you as a resource. So this is a free learning resource on Autodesk Design Academy. It's a 3-hour construction management course where you can learn a little bit more about Revit. It also talks about Navisworks, which is another tool that is used in the construction industry, particularly in thinking about like detecting clashes, like Jeff was kind of illustrating in his Revit drawing. So please take a look at that. And before we move on, and I do have a question for James too. So what questions do you have so far about the new challenge? I'll start off by asking a question. James, what is the name of the region in Pennsylvania that you intend to place your gym?
Sure. I'm really open to the whole southeastern Pennsylvania, like the Philadelphia area. But the particular town that I would love to do it in, because I know the demographics there. I've lived there in the off season throughout my NFL career. It's Conshohocken, Pennsylvania. For all those in Boston, it's essentially similar to like a Natick or a Dedham. It's like right on the Beltway around the city. And it's kind of where all the major highways converge. Great demographics. It's 15 minutes from downtown Philadelphia. And so that's where I'm thinking. But honestly, give or take, maybe 20 minutes in any direction would be a-okay with me. But yeah, Conshohocken, Pennsylvania is what I was thinking.
Thank you, James. So yeah, and using like Google Maps or Bing Maps, you can really start to, I know that some of you guys have already done that already because you've placed your designs in that region that James talked about, Conshohock, right? Yes.
Conshohocken.
I know you've got a lot of Philly fans out here.
I
want to make sure that I
and we have some weird towns, but it's right along the Schuylkill River, Conshohocken, Pennsylvania. Yeah.
Sweet. Any other questions before we move on? You can let us know in the question and answer, or maybe there's some questions that have arisen in the chat. Jenny, any questions so far?
I haven't seen any questions specific to the new challenge. I will post the link to the challenge again in the chat.
Thank you, Jenny. All right, so keep those questions going because we're going to be answering questions at the end as well, if you want to stick around for that. Anything else before we move on, Jenny?
Nope.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited about learning more from Heather about placing the building with Form-It. So Heather, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Kellyanne. And let me start to share my screen. I was going to suggest maybe we put Conshohocken in the chat so we all know how to spell that.
You can't spell that,
Heather? I'm putting it in right now. I'm actually typing it out.
Excellent. Okay.
Thank
Fantastic. You, okay. I'm sharing my screen and hopefully you're seeing my presenter view here. So what I wanted to cover today is
Heather, we can't see your screen right now.
Oh, you cannot. Okay.
Want me to stop sharing? Maybe that'll be easier.
Yeah, we can try that.
Oops, no, you started screen sharing now, Heather. You're
okay.
Good.
Great. I'm just putting it in presenter mode. You still got it now?
Looks perfect, Heather.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to build on something I talked about in the last 2 webinars, or the first segment about architecture and the second one about engineering. I talked about it in the context of Form-It, which is another AutoCAD tool that you have for free at your disposal. And so with this topic being around construction this week, I wanted to talk about how you can bring that 3D context of your model around your building, right? Those existing buildings and roadways. We'll talk about how to bring those in to Form-It. And we'll actually do that with another tool called InfraWorks, which is also an Autodesk product that you have available to you free with your student and educator licenses. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how in Form-It I might add some details around site logistics, about accessing roads and the building and creating a staging area for my building. So with that, I'm going to start this video. And this is, so let's say I have a construction site here that I've decided this is where I'm going to build on, and I want that 3D context, right, of these buildings around me. Well, I could just bring in a flat image and then, you know, model all these buildings, but I'm going to show you an easier way to do that with InfraWorks. And then I'm going to show you how to place some of these construction elements onto your site and maybe start to mark up and think about the locations of different construction aspects. So here I'm showing you InfraWorks, and what you do is just place, find a location and put in an address. So it could be a city, it could be a certain location. Here I'm choosing Porter Square in Cambridge, and I'll click on create model, and it will take usually like 5 or 10 minutes to create the model for you. And it will email you because you're of course logged in with your Autodesk ID. And once that model's ready, you can then click on the link and go in and you'll see a 3D model of that location. In this case, there's a building here located on the site, and I'm thinking of, okay, maybe I want to demolish that building and build new buildings there. So what I'm going to do in InfraWorks is I'm going to delete that building, and I'm also going to delete some of the roadways that are sort of indicating where that parking lot is, because I don't really need those either. So once I do that, what I'm going to do is just take this model and export it out of InfraWorks so that I can bring it into Revit. And I'm going to do that in 2 pieces. First, I'm going to export just the buildings. And I'm going to do that by going up to the Share and Export 3D Model button. And I can choose to export it as a .fbx file. That just allows me to maintain the materials that are mapped onto the building surfaces. So I'll export the material textures and merge objects with the same texture and export that. And then I'm going to do the same thing, but turning off the building layer. Now I'm only going to have the roadways and the site image. And I'm going to export that again in just the same way that I did before. And we're going to send you some links to show you this in a little bit more detail and at a slower pace through a YouTube video. But what I'm now doing is I moved into Format and I clicked on Import, and I'm going to import both that building model and also the roadways and site image as 2 separate files. And once I've done that, you'll see that they come on top of each other directly because they're in the same location. And then I like to manage the model a little bit by placing different aspects of it on different layers. And that gives me control over like visibility of different parts of the model. So I assigned the buildings piece to a buildings layer and the site part to a site layer. And you can see I can kind of turn those on and off just to control that. So now I have my site available here with, again, with that 3D context of the buildings and the roadways. So I can get a better sense of what's on the site, what's near the site, what's going to affect me, where are the access points to my site that might already exist and where they don't. Now I'm going to sort of fast forward and say, okay, we have some idea of the building, and that's what I've shown here. But so now what I want to do is think about the construction of this site. So first I'm going to place I'm going to use an offset lines tool to place an access road through this site. And this is going to be important for when I bring in construction equipment. And the next thing I'm doing here is I'm just tracing the bottom edge of this building where it meets the ground, or where the foundation of the building would be, because this is what's going to become important to me in terms of the construction site. So this, what I call like the building footprint or the foundation. And the little trick that I do here is when I draw it, it's on the same sort of plane as the site itself. And I move it up a ½ inch so that I have just better visuals, better graphics here. That's the only reason I do that. So now I have sort of my building footprint. And the next thing I'm going to do is place some construction equipment around the site. Here I'm going to place 2 construction cranes that are going to they're going to help me move equipment and move materials around the site. And I know that these cranes happen to have a 70-foot radius, which means, right, they can spin around and they can access up to 70 feet away from where that crane is located. So I'm going to indicate that with just a circle around that crane. So when I move the crane around, I can understand what parts of my site it'll be able to access. And then I'm also going to place a couple construction trailers. So the construction trailer is where the contractor is going to be every day on the site. They'll go there and that's where they're going to have meetings. They're going to have all of the floor plans and all of the documentation and the models in the trailer. That's where people will go to report to the job site every morning before they go out to the work area. I'm going to place a couple trucks as well. These happen to just be some concrete trucks and delivery trucks, right? Because they're going to need to access the site, every day to bring more materials in or take demolished items off of the site. And the last thing I'm going to do is designate an area for for material storage and staging. So when this equipment is delivered to the site and the materials are all delivered to the site, they need a space to be safely stored in. Usually it's fenced in and safe so that no one can kind of access it and be injured in that area. So what I did is I just duplicated a material and I renamed it and I just gave it a different color. And then I'm just placing a rectangular surface on this site. And I'm just gonna use that same trick of pushing it up just above the site so it's more readable in my view. And then I'm going to apply that material to it. And I just use sort of a paintbrush method of clicking on that material and clicking on that surface. And that now designates it with the material that I'm using for material staging. And finally, what I might do is add some labels to my model. Now, if I was really going to go and start detailing this in full detail and add dimensions and add tags and schedule things, I'd really go into a tool like Revit that Jeff showed earlier. But for the purposes of this, where I'm just sort of laying out a schematic sort of design for the construction, I'm just going to use this tool in Format called the 3D text tool, which is actually a Dynamo script. And it allows me to change the text, and I can change the size of the text. I can change the font of the text. In this case, I'm going to label this as building footprint. And then I'm going to add a couple more labels just to the other areas that I mentioned before around the material staging area and the construction access road and the contractor trailers up at the top there. And what I was just doing, what I did before also with the materials is I just, again, right-clicked on one of those materials and said duplicate. And I'm just changing the name and changing the color here because I wanted to sort of bring out the text and be a little bit bolder so that it's more readable as I spin my model around. So that sort of gets me, a schematic design sort of for the construction staging of this site along with the 3D context. So the last thing I'm just going to show is this screen, and we're going to put these links for you in the chats session so that you have access to them. But one is going to take you to a video that goes through that workflow I showed between Format and InfraWorks. And then there's also a link to an article that talks about doing additional site logistics in something like Format. So enjoy it and check it out. And I hope it comes in useful for the contest.
Thank you, Heather. That was super fun to watch, except you tore down the place where I actually go food shopping in real life. So, so hopefully you're going to be building a much better supermarket there. But that was really cool.
I used to live near there too. And I just always thought, oh, there's this huge building and it's just so one story tall. And then there's this huge parking space. Can't this space be used for something better? So that's what made me think of using that site today.
I believe it used to be a park. I think that the parking lot used to be green space. For more on Heather and Kellyanne's podcast, geography and shopping spaces in Cambridge. For now, though, we would like for you to raise your hand if you agree with this statement. So the question that we have, the statement is, technology makes the job of a builder more appealing. So raise your hand if you agree with this statement. So technology makes the job of a builder more appealing. You might even think about it like more exciting, more fun, more interesting. What do you think? People are still raising their hands. I'm sure Jenny's doing the math in her head right now.
I'm trying to, yes.
That mental math is very important, Jenny.
Very important.
So what are you thinking on percentages so far of the number of attendees that agree with this statement?
I'd say not quite 20%.
Not quite 20%. Well, it's okay to physically build your designs as part of this contest as well. I love physical scale models. So that could also be one way that you could think about this challenge. I'm seeing more hands raised though as well. So I'm glad you're still with us. All right, so moving on, we're going to talk about another thing that we're asking you to do in this contest is to forecast construction phases or to communicate construction phases, and also to think about forecasting things like, you know, the schedule, like, you know, what even the schedule for workers might be, or, you know, estimating costs and materials. So I'm going to pass the mic to our friends Pete and Joe, and they're going to talk a little bit more about how you could communicate construction phasing, and also how you could forecast your construction project using Autodesk Construction Cloud. So Pete and Joe, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Kellyanne. If you can stop sharing, I want to share my screen.
Yes.
Here. All right, let me share here. Okay, so today we've heard a lot about, you know, some of the different roles that you can play, you know, on through from the design phase on into construction. And there are a number of different things we can do even in the construction world, you know, depending on what your aspirations are and what you want to do. But one of the things that we need to do when we build out our designs, you know, we have a lot of different teams that are working together, architects and engineers and contractors, all trying to put things together on a very tight timeline in a lot of cases. And sometimes there's always inevitably some last minute changes that don't always get addressed between the other disciplines. So what I'm showing here is a tool we have on the Construction Cloud called Model Coordination. This has a similar desktop tool to Navisworks, which is something you guys do have available with your education licenses. But what this tool allows us to do is to upload those models from all the different disciplines into the cloud. And then we can have the cloud do the processing to automatically run the clash detection between those different models and look for areas where we may have some issues we need to address. So in this heat map matrix that I'm showing here, we have a breakdown of all the different models I have on my project. So I've got my architectural model, I've got electrical, mechanical, structural models all mixed in here. And it's showing me the differences in between each of these models and how many objects between the models are interfering or clashing with each other. So it's color coded, so it kind of helps highlight some of the areas where I have bigger issues I might want to tackle first. So I can see here I've got one with 800 objects that are clashing between my architectural and my structural. But what I want to do is I want to investigate these models. I want to make sure those are legitimate clashes. You know, there's a lot of times when we're modeling and designing things, there's some redundancy involved, you know, things that the architect and the structural engineer are creating both objects in their models. The architect is looking for more things aesthetically. They want to make things look nice. And they're more concerned about the finish of the objects like walls and things like that. Whereas the structural engineer is really mostly concerned about holding up the building. So they're focused really on, you know, running those numbers and making sure that the structure of that building is sound. So in here, I can see all of the different models that I have meshed together. But in this case, I'm going to look at my mechanical model versus my structural model. If I click on one of these, that's going to load those models into the viewer and allow me to investigate these clashes that are happening between these models. So right away, I can view these models all within a web browser environment. And this is also a very collaborative environment. So we can invite all of our other team members into this space. They can upload the models that they're working on and developing into this space. And those new updates will then be processed by the system. But I can circle around and I can see I've got a structural model and my mechanical model that are in here. And what it's doing is it's ghosting out all of the objects that are fine. They don't have issues together, and then highlighting or filling in the objects that do have some clashes. So I can see if I zoom in here, I've got some pipes that are a little too close to that steel. So it could have been a late change in the structural model that didn't get addressed on the mechanical model. Something that we want to take care of before we get to actual construction. You know, the big benefit there is if we did start building this building right now, you know, we would have some issues as things started to go in, and things may start coming together, and we may need to make changes, and that will impact not only our schedule, but also the overall cost of our project. So anything we can do, we want to try to tackle these changes early on in the design process to make sure that they don't impact those aspects. We can handle these design changes during the design much faster, and be able to do it much cheaper than if we let this go and let it get out into the field. So if I turn on my issues that I've already gone through, so as you go through the model, you can look at and tag which ones are important issues to look at. And you can see in here, these push pins indicate areas where I've marked the model where there are some clashes involved. In this case, I have a clash between some ductwork and a steel beam. So it just looks like the steel beam got a little bit taller and the ductwork didn't shift down to adapt to that. But in this case, I want to make sure that gets addressed. Maybe there's an issue with the ceiling height below. I don't want the ductwork to just go down any lower. We may need to look at things, adjusting that ductwork to make it fit through the ceiling space, but below that steel beam. So what I can do within the cloud construction system is I can flag what we call as an issue. So that's this little push pin, and I can drop it right on the model. So it's very visual, everyone can see it. And then on the right side here, I've got all my details around that issue. And now I can assign that issue out to the relevant party who needs to address that and pick up that change. So in this case, I've assigned it to Han Hitchcock, which is my buddy Pete over here. And he is going to take it away and talk about how this can be, tool can also be utilized in the field.
Awesome, thanks, Joe. Well, so let's go ahead and switch over to my screen. Hi, everybody, I'm Pete Murray. Lovely to meet everybody. Let me get my screen sharing here. All right. Okay, does everybody see my screen okay? Good, good. Thanks for the signal. All right. So what to pick up with my colleague Joe is, again, is he's kind of facilitating everything from the office, you know, or yeah, again, kind of like working on things from the desktop computer, doing the engineering, the designing, the clash detection, which is amazing, which is going to really help us, you know, long term as far as avoiding all the issues that are going to happen. And so what he was able to do is be able to identify those issues, you know, within Revit and some clash detection, or excuse me, even just within the BIM 360 modeling aspect of things, and then be able to communicate that out to folks like myself. So I might be a superintendent, a project manager out in the field. And from this point, I'm actually, to make it just very tangible here, I'm opening up the PlanGrid Build mobile app. And so this is tapping into all the information that's being created real time or generated from Joe. And you can see while I kind of go into my device here, I have all my projects listed here that I could be working on. They're separated between on the device and the cloud. In the cloud, or excuse me, on this device means I've downloaded it locally to my device. I notice there's a little notification there, kind of like you get a text message or an email, letting me know something's changed on the project. And these are kind of the really important components of working collaboratively. You know, Joe could be in another part of the country and communicating this information. So I could be, again, on the job site, tapping on my projects, and just like that, I'm going to go ahead and say, I received this notification, this issue that's I need to address. You can see just even right here, which we kind of refer to as our kind of our home screen here, just kind of an initial hello page for us. I can see there's an ongoing issue that I can tap on that's been addressed to me. And when I click on that, I can tap on that issue and open this up. And again, this could be, this is automatically filtered out amongst all the issues that could be happening on a project, just the one that's been assigned to me specifically. And then within that space, I can look through all this information. Again, we're kind of giving you just a little taste or a snapshot of all the content and information that could be captured in one of these issues, and really can help communicate what is going on. And so as I look through here, there could be status. So right now, of course, it's going to be open because it's something that I need to take a look at. But but you can see that we can communicate the status as we're addressing this issue. Nobody needs to send an email, a text message, or a phone call. Literally, the concept of the idea here is that we're interacting collaboratively in real time. So I could, tap in review. So next time, Joe, if he's not sitting down at his desk at that moment, he can look, okay, Pete's picked it up, he's looking at it, at least I know it's being addressed. Then through that space, I can come down here, I can look at root causes, or just another way of, if you're thinking big, if you're thinking about kind of long-term and being able to assess and figure out and learn from all this aggregated data that's being created, if we're assigning and taking the time to kind of say what caused this issue, then later on we can pull together all these issues over the life cycle of this project and be able to actually produce a bigger picture for us to be able to paint. So down below, speaking of pictures and painting things, you'll notice, here's the image that Joe captured and attached to this issue for me. No guesswork here. Again, I don't have to call him and say, is this what you mean? Quite literally, here's a snapshot from that model. And then down below, and this is where, again, somebody who absolutely loves the mobile aspect and the technology part here, I could be in that field, and let's say we're well underway in this project. So, we're looking at a structure that's already there. Joe's bringing up this issue, and he wants maybe something captured from the field in the moment, maybe to validate it. So I can click on add a picture. So again, I can actually, if I have a photograph that's already been taken on my device, I can actually attach a new photograph to it. Oops, sorry. And pull from my library. So maybe we're looking at this structure here, and I can attach it. But again, even more exciting, that's not as exciting as actually being able to use the technology right in front of us. So again, just taking a picture with my device in the moment, which obviously there's nothing like Joe's model, just the office down here. Then I can actually even mark something up in the moment, hit save. And again, this really becomes, I can tag it for future if I need to look this up later on. And maybe put in, we'll cancel this for the time being. Sorry, Joe, I don't want to mess up your tag library there. So now we've added a whole bunch more context to this specific issue here. Again, I can even attach additional files. So, again, I'm a huge, geeky technology nerd. I love 3D model renderings, things along those lines. But what I find very exciting about this whole concept is that this is very tangible and has been for a while now from your desktop computer. But again, what you're not seeing is me walking around in my office basement with my tablet, and just how quickly I was able to kind of pull up a 3D model of what Joe was looking at and showing you from his office. So for me to be out in the field and be able to look at a drawing, flip it into a 3D model and look at it, and be able to have photographs and all this type of aligned communication, it really is a huge deal for us in terms of avoiding issues and everybody on this greater project team all being on the same page. And then lastly, maybe just kind of a bread and butter point before I kind of turn it back over, Kellyanne, it's just looking at, this is kind of just the basics of blueprints, right? So looking at your drawings, being able to zoom in and out of details. So if I was looking more of a 2D aspect, right? Because we're still really, when we're in the field, typically, building off of that, I can zoom in a blueprint, no pixelization, just looking right at those details, and maybe even selecting and creating an issue just like Joe was doing from his 3D model, popping it right there in the drawing. I can come down here, assign and take pictures, all the stuff you just saw me do, maybe even assign it back to Joe. And in that moment, the moment I do that, now Joe in real time would be able to pull up that issue and any communication I put in there for him. So again, this is what we like to think of is connected construction. And yeah, that's everything I have, Kellyanne. Joe, I'll turn it back over to you guys.
Very cool. Thank you, Joe and Pete. It's so cool to see what actually like the real tools that are being used in the field right now. And it brings me back to that illustration about the future construction site and what an exciting place it will be for our students that hopefully would like to be there. So that actually leads into our next question as well. And it's a poll. So Matthew, could you put out the poll for us? And the poll question is, of the 3 fields featured in this series, which is the most appealing to you as a future career? So we've talked about architecture, we've talked about engineering, and we've talked about construction. So please let us know by taking the poll which of the three fields are most appealing to you in thinking about future careers? And even here, adult watching, maybe, I know that I was a teacher before I joined Autodesk, but I've been so fascinated by architecture that I've even been telling my daughter that she should be an architect when she grows up. Not to give bias to the field of architecture, because all three are fun. But do please let us know. Looks like engineering is in the lead right now.
So far, yes.
So we'll let the poll run for a moment. Oh, we get some architecture votes too. So which of the three? The poll is going to close in less than a minute. So architecture, engineering, or construction? I think that regardless of how long the poll runs, it looks like our engineering is in the lead. What do you think, Jenny?
I think you're right.
And it is a
Big
fine career with a lot of different ways of being an engineer too. All right, so let's end the poll now. And just to be fancy, we just shared the results, and I'm going to stop sharing. All right, so lastly, we're just going to talk a little bit in more detail about the contest, and then we'll stick around just for a couple of minutes for questions, but I can see that you've been asking questions throughout as well. So thanks to everybody on the team who's been responding to questions. And I know Jenny has pushed out the link for the new challenge. So this is Student Design Challenge number 3. You can find it at autodesk.com/Autodesk Make It Real. So the challenge is to present a game plan for how you would construct James Devlin's gym. You must make it work for the environment, the surrounding community, and for his budget. The winners will demonstrate strong construction project management skills by providing a thorough analysis that accounts for safety, detail, planning, and sustainability. You can create your own new design, use one that you previously submitted to the contest, or reference a design that was submitted to the contest by someone else. I also do just want to, again, give a shout out to Josiah Miller for sharing that awesome Tinkercad design that won during contest 1. So that is a real, Tinkercad fully fleshed out model. Josiah shared both the interior and the exterior. So we encourage you to use that model if that's the one that you choose, or you could choose another one. Do make sure when you are choosing the model, though, that I wanted to share this video with you. So when you look on Instructables, you want to make sure that you have permission to reference someone else's model. So I'm just clicking on one of the winners. And at the top of each Instructable, if you click on that little black box, it will tell you whether this Instructable content can be shared. So for this one, an example, you're free to share it, you're free to adapt it and remix it and transform it, which is what we're asking you to do with this contest. And you just need to make sure that you are giving proper attribution. So that how to attribute it is in the licenses at the top of each Instructable. I would say most of the Instructables are probably that have been submitted to this contest you could probably use, but just make sure that you double check that. So your Instructable needs to include images, text, and documentation. Design should be created using an Autodesk product. So again, you don't necessarily have to design yourself. You can use someone else's design, but like even Jeff showed and what I showed in Tinkercad, you could take a design and then think about designing a small part of it to show things like how the roof meets the wall, for example. So these are the winners. So again, celebrating the winners from the last challenge. You could also go back to challenge number 1, and those are all linked to the contest page. Judging criteria, we are judging you based on your safety mindset. So how well does the student product demonstrate attention to safety? Detail, so what we showed you in describing details like Jeff did using Josiah's model. So how clearly and convincingly does the student product demonstrate attention to detail? If you go to the contest page, there are kind of more bullet points that provide you with examples of even things that you could Google. And also the resources folder that we'll be sharing with you has some more examples of how you could show us that you have planned as well, which is another of the judging criteria. And also sustainability literacy. So how compellingly does the student product address issues of sustainability regarding the environment, affordability, and also thinking about the lives of workers? So this contest is open again internationally to students ages 13 to 19 years old. It officially launches on Monday. You've gotten your sneak preview today, but the contest page is there as well. But you cannot enter until Monday. It ends in June, so June 7th. One note that I wanted to make that's a change from the last contest is we are so excited that residents of China and South Korea probably are here with us tonight. As well, that you're joining the webinars and participating. We need to follow international law. So there was a change in international law. So you must be 14 if you live in China or South Korea. So ages 14 to 19. So that's just one change to the rules from the last time. And you can win. In this prize, you can win 3 grand prize. There will be 3 grand prize winners, each winner winning 1 prize. So it could be a $500 gift card from CDW. And I'm going to share with you some prizes also that you could get from CDW using that gift card. And 10 runners up will receive wonderful swag, a bounty of beautiful swag worth about $50 from the Instructables and Tinkercad team. So the prizes, so CDW, our friends there, made us this prize page. You could choose the $500 gift card, or you could choose one of the prizes in this prize gallery, which is linked to the contest page. So some of these I think are worth more than $500, but you can get it with your as a grand prize winner. So there's a 3D printer. There is a VR headset that's really cool. There's a ThinkPad computer that you can use as well. That's kind of beyond the Chromebook, so you can download software on it. Webinar schedule. This was number 5 out of the 6 episode series. So we will have one more episode in May. It will be a question and answer. It's going to be called Ask a Builder, and we will have a panel of people who work in the construction industry. So you can learn from them and also ask them questions about the contest. If you are just joining us, there were 4 other episodes. So this is episode 5. So if you go to the Autodesk Education YouTube, you can find other episodes of this webinar, and we will be sharing the recording of this with you as well. And last but not least, if you are seeking mentorship, if you really are loving learning about architecture, engineering, and construction, we do encourage you to join the ACE Mentor program, or to find out if there's an affiliate where you live, particularly in the United States. And Paulette Davis, who is the Western Regional Director for ACE, has shared her contact information with you as well. So please do check out the ACE website if you're interested in finding mentorship in these fields. And that is all I have for the presentation. But I am wondering, Jenny, if there are questions that people have before we sign off.
Yeah, we had a couple questions. How detailed is the information provided by InfraWorks? For example, types of roads, building materials, etc.
Who wants? Joe, do you think you could take that one? Oh wait, no, it was Heather.
I can take it.
Heather.
Yeah,
I think it was Neva's first question.
Yeah, I think I answered a little bit in the chat, but it's not going to give you information like
Unplugged it won't work.
It's not going to give you information too much about like the foundation or details about that kind of thing if you're looking for that. I believe it will show you whether a road is like a paved road or whether it's a dirt road or something like that. Hopefully that answers the question. It's really a tool for conceptual design of infrastructure projects like bridges and roadways and highways and that kind of thing. So it's a little bit more on the conceptual side, less on the real detail and documentation side.
Okay, there was another question that came in, and it's a little bit long, so bear with me. When you have things like bridge collapses, are they usually due to construction materials in the actual building process? Meaning, do these programs help prevent most accidents because they flag clashes that are addressed? I would think these tools could eliminate or narrow down liability in case of problems later. So who would like to address that one?
Well, I can say, I mean, I'm an architect, but I could say definitely, you know, anything that we can do early on before we've gotten to the construction site and before we've built the building, anything we can do to understand better about any like clashes in, say, the mechanical, you know, ducts going through the building and the structural and the structure is great. We often do simulation on the structural model to indicate like what will happen if there's an earthquake. So we can kind of do these simulations and understand what might fail on a building. So we're always trying to answer those types of questions and learn as much as we can during the design and and detailing process with architects and engineers and contractors even before we really get those buildings built. So I definitely think that what we're showing you here is going to help make things safer as we move forward.
Thank you, Heather. Kellyanne, I'm not seeing any additional questions at this time.
Well, thank you all again for sticking it out for this evening. I had a lot of fun and I learned so much about construction, and I really look forward to seeing what you've learned and how you can show what you've learned through the projects that you're going to be creating in response to this contest, I hope. James, do you have anything to say before we sign off?
No, but I mean, just like you said, it's truly incredible how much technology, helps the construction field. And I mean, just the things, Pete and Joe were showing, and now I'm thinking like, oh, I gotta get up with my contractor who's doing my house in PA, and see if he's using this, because it would be great to be able to kind of monitor things, through plan grid build and all that kind of stuff, and be able to track progress. Because right now I'm texting them, every day what's happening and what's going on. So it would be great from like an owner's perspective or an investor's perspective to keep tabs on stuff. So it's awesome. I mean, and judging by all the entries through the first two challenges and hopefully this third, I mean, there's no shortage of smart minds out there. So it doesn't surprise me that there's this kind of innovation and technology available. So it's been eye-opening from my perspective.
Awesome. Thank you, James. And I also just want to say thank you to all the, I feel very supported by our Autodesk team tonight, taking us through this journey of all these different technologies associated with the building industry, and our friends on the education team who I've been seeing how much work you've been doing in the chat tonight. Also, thank you to the participants who have been wonderfully engaged throughout this episode, and do please continue to stay engaged, and in May join us for our Ask a Builder episode. We are very excited about this and we're excited to see what you make. So we're going to sign off for tonight, and thank you so much for joining us. Take care, everyone.